Well, welcome everybody. I'm really happy that you could join us today to talk about guardianship is not the only option, supporting decisions in adulthood. I'm really excited to be here with my fellow presenters. Next slide. And who are these wonderful presenters? Well, I'm joined by Michael Gloria, who navigates ADHD, and he's here to talk about his experiences. I'm here with Kayla Torres from Conexiones Latinx, Massachusetts, Mary Viano and Joanna Rodriguez from PAL, and myself. I'm Morgan Whitlatch from the Center for Public Representation. And in a moment, we're going to each take a turns introducing ourselves and talk a little bit about what our connection is to this topic. Next slide. So here are today's topics. This is kind of our roadmap for what we want to be accomplishing today. We're going to talk about supported decision making, kind of the what, why, and how of it. There are a lot of myths out there about supported decision making as well as guardianship, and so we're going to work to bust some of those myths and clarify terminology. And then we're going to dive deep into stories about supported decision making and decision making supports. And that's going to include in education, in healthcare, in mental health care, in foster care. And we're going to talk about some of the common legal tools that are used alongside supported decision making, summarize some key takeaways, and then provide some resources to you so that you can continue to get educated on this topic and hopefully also spread the word. And then we want to leave a lot of time at the end, about half an hour for Q&As for a dialogue, and the Q&A portion will not be recorded. Next slide.
So again, as
Turn things over to Mary.
awesome, thanks Morgan, really appreciate it. So my name is Mary Viano, as mentioned, and we're going to have time to really talk about this. This topic is very near and dear to my heart because often supported decision making is a conversation that happens in intellectual disabilities or developmental delay, and it doesn't often hit the mental health community and different people's abilities and connections, or different kind of all different abilities, right? So it's not something that is often talked about. We are in an opportunity to make decisions as family members and people with different abilities ourselves to say, what do we need? What do we want? We are elevating this conversation. Supported decision making is a term that is used. It's a term where people are Googling it. You'll find out the definition as Morgan explains it. And Kayla, Michael, and Joanna and I, we're going to talk about that exists, but there's not a word that is typically connected to it. So we want you to jump in with us to explore this opportunity tonight. Michael's going to talk from the lived experience of a young person. We're going to have the parent perspective and also individual perspective. And Morgan is really going to bring some highlights to the work that she's been doing to really shift this paradigm across not just all systems. People have families. They have people that love them and connect with them. And we want to elevate this and start having the conversation, the curious conversation to say, individuals deserve a quality of life that includes them at the table. And that is across different disabilities or different abilities, as I often say, right? It's how we look at that person and do that next step. So we're excited you're here for the ride with us and to explore this opportunity. It is one that we're going to continue to have at PAL with our partners here as well. But we're excited for you to think about things and ask some questions too on what you need to know from us. So I'm excited you're here. Our whole group is.
That's wonderful. So, first of all, just talking very broadly about what is supported decision making. Supported decision making really is a recognition that people, including people with disabilities, should be able to have control over their lives and be able to make their own decisions with the support they need and want. They should be able to pick supporters to get advice from, and they should be able to exercise that kind of decision making skills so that they can grow those skills over time. And you can probably hear from my voice, it's a very passion project of mine. We're going to now kind of introduce ourselves and who we are and what our connection to supported decision making is. So you get a better idea of, what we're advocating for when we talk about a paradigm shift and what we're advocating for when we talk about people learning about what all of their options are for supporting adults with disabilities into adulthood. Next slide. So we'll start with Mike. Mike, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Michael DeGloria Jr. I'm 25 years old. I have been utilizing supported decision making since around the age of 16, 17. But before that, I had, some challenging moments around this particular topic. As a young man, you kind of want to find your own way. But after chatting with my mom and different supports around it, I kind of found like a nice balance between that and some strong supports. So, like I was alluding to earlier, I do navigate ADHD in college, and I was doing the same thing in high school.
And you want to talk about the quote you picked?
Oh yeah. So the quote I picked is basically, I think it's kind of like a powerful message. We were given two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? We should listen before we even say anything. I think when we kind of sit in the present moment, a lot of things kind of just tend to solve themselves. We don't need to be quick to action all the time. And this has helped me like along the path of like this supported decision making. Most of the time, decisions need to be made, but sometimes they can, if you just kind of listen to what people are saying, they can solve themselves. So that's a quote that I really like and I try to live by.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Joanna, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. My name is Joanna Rodriguez. I am a mom of two, a 25-year-old and a 15-year-old. I'm from Honduras. I immigrated to this country many years ago. What I wanted right is that I advocate for rights as a parent to parent. Like I work with parents with lived experience. I speak up for our children's rights using bilingual tools and cultural helpers who understand our family backgrounds. So I come from a different background, so I want to make sure that I bring that out to the public. I try to build strong bonds, talk openly using my culture, my stories, traditions, and the language that we grow and trust and prepare families to grow big for their children and make big choices. I talk about guiding through services. We help navigate health care, mental health, and I talk a lot about stigma as well. And talk a lot about money, finances, and housing supports, and everything, every other resource that is out there. And we try to plan safely ahead. Like Michael said, it's like we start young so that in the future we end up with a safe environment where we are supporting ourselves. So blending our family cultures, way of support into adulthood. So that's what we try to do in my family. And my quote is, I am an everyday parent of children with special needs who advocate fiercely with cultural pride and balance. I fight through school systems to protect our children's safety, secure their future, and teach independence with supported decision making, carrying our family's unbreakable spirit forward no matter what. Thank you.
Kayla?
Hi, everybody. So my name is Kayla Torres. I am the director of Conexiones Latinos, Massachusetts, but also I'm a mom of three wonderful young adults in different categories of disabilities. And I often um, I before I was just like you. Before I knew supported decision making, I was completely lost and didn't know about this. So it is great to be here. As an advocate for my child's rights, I feel like it's important for them to have a voice and to be validated, right, with their needs and with emotional support for them as well. So I try to balance those things as well. And navigate system like the education, the healthcare, the services of both. I have two actually who have guardianship, and I have one who has support decision making. So I walk right the dual path on that. And I try to encourage the independence with the support decision making, protecting protect safety, plan for the future, and carry love and accountability every day with the three of them. So I think it's very important to um, let them know that their future, they are human beings, that their future, while I may have some sort of say in their day to day, I prefer for them to advocate for themselves and be supported. So hopefully I can try to explain a little bit more about that later. Thank you.
So, my name is Mary. As I had mentioned, I advocate for all individuals' rights and equity, balanced relationships with child and communications, but first and foremost, I'm a parent of 3 young adults and raising a grandchild that's 6. Navigating system has been part of my life very early on with them, and I didn't define my kids' needs, my adult children's needs as children with systems that needed to support them. Yet, I really needed to connect to healthcare systems, mental health support, often had home care support, right? And finance and housing. I always brought my children, and sometimes when you know more, you do better. I often say that my oldest child didn't get the best me. He got the me that knew not very much, and my grandchild's going to get the better me, that's going to know a little bit more. Protection and safety and support is very important for supported decision making, but also carrying curiosity and learning and teaching is going to be really important. Curiosity is going to be really important in this conversation because people don't understand the term supported decision making. So just being curious and elevating that is going to be super important. I will also say that as I advocated in the work that I did specifically within PAL, I didn't realize that often people didn't ask my loved ones what they wanted, right? Family members what they wanted. So I tried to shift that in the way that I balance that relationship with my children, but also in the way that systems didn't bring them to the table. So my quote tonight is every individual has the right to choose who walks with them. We define our family. Though I identify as white, my father was a first generation American from Italy, and Joanna and I talk often, though she's from Honduras and I'm from from Italy, my family, that the reality is if you know one family, you know one family. Equity has to happen. So I just want to say is Kayla, Joanna, and Michael elevated this piece. I'm honored to be with them because often people that are brown or black or don't often have a language that's first English, they're not brought to the table and they need to be. So equity for us in supported decision making is really, it can happen across all families and situations. So when we elevate self-advocacy and family, we strengthen the world journey because advocacy, empowerment, and self-direction can be a solo act, but it truly is a family business. I wasn't told that I couldn't call my parents well within my 40s. I know you don't believe that I'm 40. I'm a little older than that. But I wasn't told that I couldn't pick up the phone and call my parents. We need to have people across disabilities and abilities be able to bring the team members to the table for them to support that next step. And always remembering, even if a child is nonverbal, they have a voice. But for individuals that have mental health, they have a decision too. So really excited that you're here with us tonight.
And my name's Morgan. I come from a lawyer background. I consider myself an ally. I've been doing a lot of work in the supported decision-making field, both in terms of legal representation over the course of my career, policy work, providing technical assistance on some of these very issues, surrounding capacity and alternatives to guardianship. But I really consider myself an ally because the real experts in this are people like Mike and Joanna and Mary and people with lived experience. They're the real experts, and I view it kind of as my role to be elevating those voices so that people can really understand what supported decision making is and what all of the options are for supporting decision making into adulthood. Because it's all about finding the right fit and making sure that families have the information that they need to be able to make that choice together. So I'm the director of supported decision making initiatives at the Center for Public Representation, which has been advancing the civil rights of people with disabilities for almost 50 years. We've been involved in a number of projects around supported decision making in Massachusetts and beyond. We were involved over a decade ago in the first demonstration project for supported decision making in the country that was formally evaluated. And since then, there have been 6 more such demonstration projects around the country, around the state. And so we know that supported decision making can work for people, and we want people with disabilities and their families to know what all the options are and ways in which to support youth into adulthood and really be, advancing decision making rights. I didn't include a quote, but I included two websites that have more resources. Both the Center for Public Representation's website as well as our CPR SDM website, which also has resources not only that are national resources, but also Massachusetts specific resources about supported decision making and less restrictive options. So I encourage you to visit those. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of set the stage a little bit. This in Massachusetts, when a person turns 18 years old, they become a legal adult. And that means the law says that they get to now make their own decisions about their health care, education, finances, and other personal matters. But it doesn't mean that they have to make those decisions alone. There are lots of tools to support them in making those decisions. But it does mean that parents are no longer allowed to automatically make legal decisions for the person, even though they could do that all through their child's childhood. And this is true even if the person has a disability. Schools refer to this time as a transfer of rights time. And in my experience, that transfer of rights period can be really intimidating time for families, particularly when they don't know what all of their options are for supporting young adults with disabilities in decision making. And they may be incorrectly told by schools or doctors or state governmental agencies or adult service systems and healthcare providers that the only way to remain involved in their child's adult life is to go to court and become a legal guardian. And that's not true. Getting guardianship is a serious step to take, and it's important to fully understand the consequences first. There are also other options that may work better for the person or the family without the need for guardianship. So I feel it's really important for everyone to know what all of those options are so that the family can choose the path that's going to be right for them and the right fit. It's never too early or too late to learn about what all those options are. So on this slide, I've listed kind of the main legal tools related to decision making for adults in Massachusetts, and it's certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's certainly some key ones that come across in my work. And each of the tools on this slide may be needed under certain circumstances to support a person with a disability. However, we need to appreciate that some of these tools are heavier than others when they're applied to a person. So when an adult with a disability needs some support with decision making, I found that there can be a tendency for others to go too quickly down the list to the bottom, to treat court-appointed guardianship as the default. And while there may be times guardianship is necessary, we need to recognize it as the heaviest tool because of what it's doing to a person's rights. It's involving the court, it's involving removing the person to legally act for themselves, and that's a serious step to take. It's something we all value in having self-determination in our own lives. And so I really encourage people to carefully look through each of these tools to find the right fit. Next slide. So what is guardianship? As I said, I think there are some myths out there about what guardianship is and what it's not. And I want to help dispel some of those myths. Guardianship for adults is different than guardianships for a child. So guardianships for adults are a formal legal process involving the probate court, and it's the court or judge that decides whether an adult is incapacitated. And we're going to talk about what that term means in Massachusetts shortly. If the court does make that kind of determination, then it's going to decide whether someone else, called a guardian, needs to make all or some of the decisions for that adult. So, since guardianship involves the probate court, if I talk to a parent who tells me that they are the guardian over their son, I always ask them how old the son is. If they tell me he's 18 years or older, I ask, did they go to court to become his guardian? And if they tell me no, then I know the parent is not, in fact, the legal guardian of their adult son. So sometimes parents need to be reminded that they're not automatically the legal guardians for their children with disabilities when they turn 18, and they need to be supported to understand what that means. Guardianship means getting a court order. So there are different types of court order guardianship arrangements in Massachusetts, and they vary in scope, which is why it's really important to always look at the court order to know what authority the guardian has or doesn't have. if the court decides to order a guardianship, it should be the least restrictive form to meet the needs of the person with a disability. And so you'll see on this slide that there are different types. There are temporary guardianships, which are really used really kind of in emergency circumstances to avoid imminent harm. There are limited guardianships. So the court may limit the guardianship to just a certain aspect of the person's life, like medical decisions. There's conservatorship, which is for people who have more significant finance money that they can't themselves handle even with support, or can't pick someone else to handle those financial decisions for them. There's full guardianship, which means kind of a broad decision-making authority over the person's personal affairs, but that power is not unlimited. In Massachusetts, you might hear about the phrase Rogers guardian or Rogers monitor. There are certain decisions that the guardian doesn't have automatic authority to make under the law. So, for example, that includes things that are considered extraordinary treatments, such as administering antipsychotic medication or withholding life-saving or life-prolonging treatment. And that's in Massachusetts when these Rogers orders or Rogers guardians come into play. And that's something to kind of keep in mind, that a guardian's power is not all-encompassing in the eyes of courts. And so it's really important to know exactly what the scope of that guardianship is and make sure that the guardianship is really tailored to the person and what they may need if they do in fact need a guardian. Next slide. So what do I mean when I say incapacitated? What does that mean in Massachusetts? Well, it has a special definition under Massachusetts law, and that definition has a lot of parts to it. Okay, in this kind of context, when we say incapacitated person for the purposes of guardianship, we're meaning that the person, for reasons other than advanced age or minority, has a clinically diagnosed condition that results in the inability to receive and evaluate information or make or communicate decisions to such an extent that they lack the ability to meet essential requirements for their physical health, safety, or self-care, even with appropriate technological assistance. Now, that's a big mouthful, but you'll see there are 5 bullet points under this. So there really are, you should think of it as having 5 different conditions to this definition. So when the court is determining whether or not someone meets the legal definition of incapacity, the court is supposed to be taking into account that the person may not qualify for the appointment of a guardian because of the type of assistance that they get. Capacity really is not an all or nothing determination. It's not based solely on diagnosis or mental or behavioral health related disability or so-called developmental age, which is a misnomer now. People may have the capacity to make some decisions, but not others. They may be able to make some decisions at some times, and not others. They may only be able to make decisions if they get help understanding what their options are. They may be able to not make the decision themselves, but pick someone else to make the decision for them. And all of those pieces need to be thought of when we're thinking about really whether or not someone meets that incapacitated definition. Capacity and incapacity are also not set in stone. I know my capacity certainly has changed over time, and so too can people with disabilities capacity change over time. And so I always try to put incapacity quotes because I don't really like the term very much because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. But it is a legal term in Massachusetts that you should know and know what it means when you're thinking about whether or not guardianship is appropriate for someone. Next slide. So what is guardianship not? It's certainly not the only option to consider. It is one option in the toolbox, but it's not the only option to consider. There may be other options that will work better, and we're going to be talking more about what those options are in a minute when we talk about the stories of how this can work in practice. Guardianship is also not just a piece of paper. I think we have to realize that guardianship is not like the court process is over once you get that court order. The court has ongoing monitoring responsibilities. There are ongoing reporting responsibilities. You're going to hear more from Kayla, who's going to talk from the perspective of a guardian. It is an ongoing court process. There can be more hearings. Rogers guardians are reviewed every year, and there's monitoring involved in that. I sometimes talk to families and they wish they had known that before they got guardianship. They wish they had known about it really being an ongoing process. Guardianship is not all powerful. As I said, people don't lose their human rights. Guardians should involve people with disabilities that they're supporting in their decision making so that they can build capacity over time. And they should recognize that people with disabilities who are subject to guardianship still have human rights and still should be able to direct their lives as they can, as much as they can. And that's what Massachusetts law says guardians are supposed to do. That's what the National Guardianship Association says guardians are supposed to do. Um, Guardianship doesn't guarantee safety. I'm not aware of any studies that have shown that people under guardianship are automatically safer. And so when someone calls me and says they want to get guardianship, I always ask why, because sometimes guardianship can be the solution to certain issues that come up, but sometimes it's not. So if they tell me I'm worried that my son is going to get arrested, well, guardianship doesn't stop someone from getting arrested. Okay. You should instead be asking, why are you concerned they're going to get arrested? How can we safety plan for interactions with police? How can we try to support the person in those kinds of interactions? And so, really understanding that guardianship isn't the solution to all problems. And guardianship is not without its downsides. For example, if you are receiving certain kinds of adult services, or your child is receiving adult services, a guardian can't serve as a paid caregiver under certain circumstances under programs in Massachusetts. In addition, guardianship is, if you want to change the guardianship or in the guardianship, it can be really difficult to end a guardianship. It's much easier to get guardianship than get out of a guardianship, in my experience. And it's because the decision about whether or not a guardianship is ended or changed is not up to you. It's up to a judge. A judge has to decide whether or not the person remains incapacitated or whether there's a less restrictive option that'll work. And in my experience, judges undo far less guardianships in Massachusetts. And so it's something to kind of keep in mind, and why we encourage people to think about as guardianship as an option, but not the first option. It really should be an option of last resort after less restrictive options have been meaningfully tried first. Next
Two,
slide.
th- two things that I'm just going to add to what you said, Morgan, if I can. You know, it is interesting that parents also, because I was that parent that thought that my kid went to bed at 17 and then turned 18. Parents don't immediately become guardians. It is a court process, and it doesn't matter the individual's ability. So if you have a child that has no language skills and needs total care, you're not guardian unless there's a court proceeding. And that would be the same for like the mental health system, right? We have many parents that support their kids maybe in a group care, and they think at 18 when the child goes to sleep, all of a sudden they're the guardian. And this is a court process, right, Morgan?
It is a court process, and I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. But it is a court process, and it doesn't matter the significance of the amount of support needs that the person with the disability has. It is not automatic. It does require a court process. And it's why it really is important to plan with your family member and not wait until the person is 18. Really be thinking about how can we be supporting growth of communication skills over time? How can we support access to other decision-making supports? And how can we make sure that when the person is turning 18, the right supports are in place? So I'm going to now turn this over to Kayla to talk about what supported decision-making is. Kayla?
Thank you, Morgan. So we're going to talk a little bit about now what support decision making is, right? And support decision happens when people, including the individuals with a disability, right, make their own decision with help, with some help, right? And people that they choose, they trust, and they become supporters, and they provide the guidance and they provide the system. That's not to say that they are going to make the decision for the person. And that's why, supported means. And we want to be able to continue allowing the person to keep their rights, their legal rights. And we want that person to build the decision making skills over time. And they will learn from their mistakes, because there are going to be mistakes. And they will learn. And so we are. And this process, it can be formal or informal. It is very flexible. So meaning that what works today maybe doesn't work next month, and we can change it over time. Next. And then we have what is not decision making. And decision making, like I said, is not making the decision for them, right? We have to allow them to make that decision. It is not for the person to make decisions alone. You know, you cannot say, oh, you're on your own just because you don't like what they want to do or how they think. You are not going to remove that support from them. It still need the support. It is not the person making the decision only if you agree. And it is not something that is a one size fits all, you know, so we have to have also that in mind. And it's not for people with certain kinds of disability. I will, as an example, I can say, like I say in the beginning, I have one with support decision making. He's verbal and he has autism, and but we navigate, you know, together. But he makes decisions and we kind of brainstorm and we have support, additional support that helps him to make those, help him to come to the conclusion, right, or the decision that he's looking for. However, I have two other who um, one is nonverbal and the other one is limited in terms of how to speak. And even though they are in guardianship, I continue to provide, I included with them the support decision making. First of all, they're human beings and they have rights. And so I always validate that with them. And in the extent or capacity that they can make those decisions, we do the same with them as we do with our other son. We try to help them to come to their conclusions and see the you know, kind of like navigate that what are the pros and cons of those decisions. So it is very important to realize that those decisions that they make is because they're human beings, right? With the rights and validation. And it's not just because one is autistic or other is not and things like that.
Kayla, one of the things I really appreciate when you talk about supported decision making is I think frequently it's like supported decision making is pitted against guardianship. It's either supported decision making or guardianship. And we really try to, supported decision making, I think, in its most traditional form is an alternative to guardianship because it's the person with the disability that's making the decision, is that person who's signing on the dotted line. But supported decision making principles and involving people in their decision making can and should be included in guardianship. And that's what Kayla really does model. And I really appreciate when you talk about that, Kayla. The other thing I would say about supported decision making is that I think sometimes people say, like, okay, well, you know, either someone makes the decision for you or you make the decision alone. And no one makes decisions that way. I know I certainly don't. I always get advice from people that I trust. And when I do that, I'm probably considered to be quite wise. But when people with disabilities try to do that, it can sometimes people can question their ability to make decisions at all. And so I think perhaps we give supported decision making, which is really human decision making, a special name, is because we should remind ourselves that people with disabilities, even if they need more help or different kinds of help, should still be able to have the opportunity to make decisions in their own lives. Um, you know, I think we get so caught up, I think, sometimes in buzzwords and legal terms, we forget what the core of supported decision making really is, which is human decision making. Next slide. So these are some of the common questions I get about supported decision making. And, you know, I wanted to kind of highlight some of those. First of all, is it new? I think I get this question a lot because we are seeing more and more states in the United States introduce legislation or formally adopt laws that recognize supported decision making expressly. But supported decision making isn't new in the sense that it's been formally recognized in our neighbors in Canada for over 40 years. And it's not new in that many people use it even every day, even if they don't give it that kind of special name. Um, Another common question I get is who can use it? And I think a common myth about supported decision making is that it can be only used by certain people with certain kinds of disabilities, and that's not accurate. You know, a person's ability to use supported decision making isn't determined by their IQ or diagnosis. I, for example, have supported people in using supported decision making who have intellectual disabilities, who have autism, who have psychiatric or mental and behavioral health disabilities. I've supported people using supported decision making who don't use speech to communicate or who have dementia. And so when we're considering whether or not guardianship is necessary, supported decision making should really be among the list of possible alternatives discussed first for everybody, without bringing too many assumptions to the table in doing that. How is it different from substitute or surrogate decision making or shared decision making? And I call this the curse of too many SDMs. Okay, we use too many acronyms, and I'm an offender as well. So, how is it different from shared decision making? Well, in Massachusetts, in the education special educational context, an adult student can share their educational decision making authority with a trusted parent or adult. And what that means is that they make decisions together. Um, and that's what shared decision making is. It's kind of decision making by consent. Together, you all are agreeing. Okay. Supported decision making is different than that. Supported decision making recognizes that the person with a disability can take the advice of the people and listen to that advice, but they may make ultimately a different decision. They are the final decision maker in this, and that's how supported decision making is different than shared decision making. Substitute or surrogate decision making, that basically means someone else. In this case, someone other than the person with the disability, be it a guardian or an agent under a power of attorney or a representative payee for Social Security. They're the ones that are making the decision for the person. Okay, now they should be involving the person in that decision, but they ultimately are the legal decision maker. And that's different from supported decision making, where it's the person with the disability who gets to make the decision. They're the legal decision maker. So that's how it's different from these different SDMs that are out there. Is it legal? Yes, 100% it's legal. Now, it is true that Massachusetts is one of the few states that hasn't formally passed a supported decision-making agreement law yet. There's one pending in the legislature now. But supported decision-making has been recognized in other ways in Massachusetts. So over a decade ago, Massachusetts had, as I mentioned, one of the first series of formal demonstration projects that supported people with disabilities using supported decision making in their lives. And that pilot resulted in the first court order to terminate a guardianship in favor of supported decision making in 2015. So that's like over a decade ago. In addition, supported decision making can be seen as a reasonable accommodation for a person's disability under federal and state law. So it is legal and it can be used in Massachusetts and across state lines. Is it safe? I think this is a really big question to get. And as I've said, we're not aware of any studies that prove people under guardianship are automatically safer. But research has shown that people with disabilities who have more control over their own lives are better able to avoid and resist abuse, and they have better life outcomes. People with disabilities who have greater self-determination have better employment outcomes, are more likely to live in the community, are more likely to be connected to the community, and that makes them indeed safer. Studies have also indicated that supported decision making is particularly appropriate for people with mental health conditions. Research shows that people who are engaged by their treatment providers in decision making are more likely to kind of form a therapeutic alliance with them, and that therapeutic alliance is linked to positive outcomes, positive therapeutic outcomes. And so there is this evidence that we need to take into account when we really ask that question, is it safe? Safety it has been linked to self-determination and trying to promote people being actors in their own lives. And that certainly is one of the goals of supported decision making. Next slide. Kayla, do you want to talk about the 5 supported decision making steps?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about making the support decision making, you want to be able to have kind of like a guidance, right, on how to do it, where to start. So one of the things that you have to sit down and talk with your loved one um, is to start the conversation. This is the time where you are going to be 18, where you are 18, and we need to identify where the best route is, right? Whether um, how you want to do this, who are the people you are going to identify to be your supporters. Is it mom? Is it dad? Is it aunt? Maybe a friend? someone that, because we don't know, we assume it's us, but we shouldn't assume it could be different. And that's something that you start with talking about. Then once you identify those trusters, those supporters for him, and that you talk and that he or she talks with those supporters and they're willing and able to help you, the next step will be to plan and communicate, and planning about how it's going to look like, right? um, when is going to how this is going to be happening in his life or her life. Then you want to consider writing a support decision making agreement. And like we say, it could be formal or informal, but maybe something in writing could be a little bit more of the formal part, right? And more visual specifically, for people who might benefit from that. And then you share that agreement with people who need to know, like your doctors, like the school, service providers. Um, and then that way everyone kind of like is covered, is on the loop of the of what you're doing with the support decision making. And again, it's something that you can review and kind of adapt and modify whenever it is needed as well. Next slide.
So we're now going to turn to Mike to talk more about his journey with supported decision making. Mike?
Hi everyone, my name is Mike. So as I was saying a little bit earlier when I introduced myself, my first real interactions with supported decision making was around the time I was graduating from high school. That's when kind of like my IEP was kind of nearing its end, or that there was an opportunity for my input. And that was a very powerful moment for me. Um, I feel like as like a kid growing up, you're in these meetings, your parents are saying things, your teachers are saying things, and you really could care less, to be honest. Just being honest, because it feels like it's about you, but it's not about you because you're not involved in the conversation. They might glance at you a little bit and say, "What do you think?" But at the end of the day, what that moment kind of taught me is that I have a choice or an opinion. Um, and like I said, that was really powerful. So continuing out of high school, right, I was going to be an electrician, and it didn't end up working out. But throughout that time, what ended up happening is I've always been close to my mom, but my mom had become like my support. And I would just like ask my mom what she thought. I just see what she'd say. Sometimes I'd listen, sometimes I wouldn't. But the whole point is that like we built a different type of relationship as I got older, right? Where I felt like I could make decisions on my own. Like this is me in San Francisco, and I just told my mom like 2 weeks prior that I'm going to San Francisco for a conference that I'm interested in. And she says, "All right, are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna go." So the point that I'm trying to get at is that I also work with other young people who are at risk, whether that be they're homeless, like court involved, or in the juvenile, what's that called, in DCF custody. And something that I do at my job is I'm not their guardian, I'm not anything like that, but giving them a choice in what they can and cannot do at work, right? So we're training them to be able to be independent, to be able to be employed, to be able to save money, to do these different things. And sometimes I usually just say, maybe it's an illusion of choice, but it's still a choice. Hey, you want to take 2 minutes right now and just reset, or do you want to jump back out there and like let's start? We process donated books, or do you want to start scanning books again, and then see what they say. Um, so I have been able to kind of be like that support for some of these other young people. So I think, and if people, I know there's some like different mental health conditions in this event. I know there's autism. I know there's things that are like a lot more challenging to navigate. I know it is challenging, but it's a lot less challenging, I feel like, than some other conditions that make life kind of difficult. So what I would say to that is just support your person that you love the best of their abilities and do what they can as they're being independent, whatever that may look like. Um, get them involved, and I think that's really a powerful moment. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about me and my story involved with this.
Thank you so much, Mike. Now turn to Kayla to talk about some stories of supported decision making in healthcare.
So, yeah, so like I said, I have one of my son who we do practice support decision making. I mainly me go with him to attend with him to appointments. However, one of the things that him and I have always had a conversation, like checking before even the appointment, is like, how do you want this to go? Where, first of all, what are your questions to the doctor? And sometimes he's like, I don't know, mom. And I'm like, no, you have to think. And maybe maybe someone will say, well, you know, you're the mom, but I want him to be able to express what he thinks, what he feels, what his concerns are to the doctor. Because at the end of the day, the appointment is for him, not for you, right? And I want him to be able to learn those skills and self-advocate because there's going to be a time when I'm not going to be here. So he needs to learn that. And I always have that in mind. So I always have this conversation with him and say, so you're concerned about something, any pain, any, so I just give him cues. By the time the appointment goes, I always ask him, you want me to go in with you? Do you want me to stay out? And it is very, for me, it's very, I feel really proud of him because initially it was like, no, you come with me. And so I was there. And there are conversations, right, that young men doesn't want to have in front of their moms. And it seems for him like he didn't want to answer. And I'm like, I can step out. And so I was stepping out. They did the conversation and then I come back. But now he's being more open to say, no, I'll take this. I got it. And he goes, he talks, he gets everything. He comes out, he comes with his summary and share with me his summary. And I feel, and I say this because, you know, he's now 27 years old. And if you were asking me when he was 18, 19, 20, even 22, if I saw that this was possible with him, I will say nah. But I, I always insisted on giving him the support, the tools, um, helping him to understand what his rights are in every area. And I think that at this point he got it, he understood, and now he's able to advocate and he's able to do the things, as he has learned. There are moments when he really doesn't want to do the talk, and he's like, I don't want to talk today, and then I have to go in with him. But again, it's his decision, right? And this is what we want. We want to support the decision that he makes, and we want to be able to applaud him for the things that he does well. And for when there are mistakes, we sit down and say, "Hey, buddy, this is not the way it's supposed to be. Let's talk about this. How can we change this?" And so it works. It has worked, and I think that he's been able to transfer those things that he has learned, those skills, to every area of his life: healthcare, financials, even the community. So it is very important that for me, I think personally it works very well, that support decision making with him, because now he is able to feel like he's validated and that he's been heard, and that people take him seriously, because in the past he didn't feel that way. So it has been a very productive way of helping him without restricting him or without kind of like segregating him or devaluing him. So I think that for me it's wonderful. As a mom, I feel amazing about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Joanna, do you want to talk about finances?
Yes. And I'm going to start with saying that I'm gonna. There was a time I went to see a lawyer because of a trust, and the lawyer said to me, "I see that there's an IEP here. I see that this is happening. Uh, have you ever thought about guardianship?" And I never, and I've just been thinking throughout this whole time, I never thought about anything like that because culturally speaking, it's not something we discuss ever. Because for us, our children stay with us. I mean, 40, 50, 60, 70, like, so you're still in the same house, we're all together, we all make decisions together and everything. And I never thought about it. And I said, wow, a question came to me. Have I really prepared my child to be on his own, making decisions about everything? And I started thinking about that, and I said, let me do an inventory about this. And one of the things was finances. Like, he's gonna start to work. Have I prepared him to save? Does he understand how to do a budget? Does he understand how to go to the bank and open a checking account? How to write a check? And it sounds small, okay? But I love doing things for my kids. I enjoy it. And it's cultural too. Um, and I started little, I started by, giving him a check, a savings account, giving him $100 and going, having him go out. He was going to make some mistakes, but allowing him to make those mistakes and him learning from those mistakes. Then, like, I went higher and higher, like, now you open your own account, then let's work together. Then put in like little seeds, like planting seeds in his head. Oh, I think it would be a good idea for you to talk to a financial advisor. They have a lot to say. Why don't you make an appointment with the bank and talk to them about X, Y, and Z and things like that? And he will come to me, we will talk about it. And we will go on, and we will try to share different stories. He will come with questions, I will answer the questions. And it's just amazing how to see him grow up to, and he understands a lot more about finances now. He can be impulsive, but however, he worked on that. He has tools. Who am I going to talk about when I become so impulsive or so stressed about certain things? Okay, I have this person. I have a mentor. I have an advisor. I can go to college. I have a friend that can talk to me. So it putting those people in his life, and both of my kids' lives, so that they know whom to go to when it comes to finances, allowing them to make mistakes and being there when there's an opportunity for you to continue to learn with them. Thank you.
So now I'm going to jump in a little bit on kind of stories that continue in supported decision making and really reflecting on mental health. So I mentioned this earlier, but just again, want to talk about the overnight change. Our young people, our kids, right, our loved ones, they go to bed at 17. They sleep through the night, hopefully, stop the video games and or social media, and they wake up and they're 18. And what changes? Chores getting done more, anybody gotten any payments for the mortgage real off the bat that next day, right? That doesn't happen. One of the things, though, that is a challenge is that the changes overnight, and our loved ones have to often ask us to be included. So if you were to go back to the healthcare, Kayla's being pulled in because there's this opportunity with her adult son to have that, right? That's not going to be the given. And especially in mental health, if you go to a psychiatric hospital, the first thing is not that they're saying to you, would you like to sign some releases for your mom, dad, your grandparent, your aunt, uncle? It doesn't happen. The change is overnight and the impact is overnight. The impact in healthcare, the impact in education. Kids can sign out at 16. They can sign out of school. They don't need the parents' permission to sign out of school, to withdraw, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that are a little bit unsettled because at 13 right now, the primary care, you can't often see the portal of your 13-year-old with your primary care. And there's some shifts and change. So what's really important is where I'm going to bring you now. We all hope that our young people get a license and or they're able to take public transportation on their own, right? They can take a bus, they can take a train. Doesn't mean that they have to drive, but they have to have the skill, right? They've got to know the skills of transportation, whether they're going to go through driver's ed and drive, they're going to take the bus or the train alone, right? What are they going to do? We at PAL, in shared pieces with both Kayla and Morgan, we want the conversations to happen early. And we're not talking 16, 17. We want the conversations to happen at 12, 13, 14. We want you to have conversations. And also, if there's a different ability, it's okay. But you got to practice to put your kids in the passenger seat. So my kid, and I mentioned the oldest kid, he didn't get the best of me, right? You don't know what you don't know. And in the Italian family, you just do what I say and things are good, right? Like that's just the culture, just being honest, right? The second kid, I was like, we've got to do this differently. And I'm able to talk with my kids. And then my third child, it was different. And her abilities are different, but I also brought her to the table of choice, right? Of choice and connection. The other piece that's super important, and this is a skill set and it's something that we really have embraced in the mental health community, is motivational interviewing. To have conversations with your loved ones in a way of curiously asking questions. As a child, when I was raised, there wasn't the question, tell me more, right? That just wasn't, it was often like, do as we want, right? There was a different piece. Tell me more. What would happen? Michael talks a lot about, like, I went to San Francisco. So were there conversations of, okay, if you need something in emergency, what are you going to do? Right? To show up and have open conversation. Motivational interviewing is a great place to be able to embrace that. And we'll share some links for that as well, because it talks and it teaches about open conversation with an adult, but also allowing the young person's voice to be at the table, right? Without blame, without shame, without guilt, but really exploring what that means. Also, you know, there's a few mentors I've had in my life that I have to thank along the way. There are people in systems that are great people, and the systems have been built to work the way that they have been built. Often that does not include family members. And that's just being honest. It is different across different places. I am a parent of adopted young people. I've also done foster care for a long time. I have mixed abilities within my home. Um, as my oldest child, who was supported by multi systems, said, I'm not sure I want to sign this. I want to see what my mom has to say about this. The question or the comment back was often, why do you need your mom? You're 20 years old. Can't make the decision on your own. Nobody said that to me when I was 35 and I wanted to call home to ask my mom because I didn't share my ability or disability. So why do we hold people that need system support in a different place, right? So I know, and I'm going to like do a shout out. There are a lot of people on this Zoom tonight, and many of you sit in systems. Your caseworkers, your intensive care coordinators, your therapists, your teachers. I absolutely respect you. And what I need you to do is elevate the conversation to include the family. Allow the individual to bring the adults in that are their team members, right? It doesn't matter if a young person's in foster care, they have adult allies. I see Morgan as an ally all the time, right? In the different pieces that she's in. We embrace it kind of together. So just thinking about that too, that often there are systems that all, like you're 18, it just changes and it shifts. The best skill set that you can do in this journey of mental health is to have that ability to get the 12, 13, 14-year-old. I think if you had Kayla, Joanna, or Michael, or Morgan, any of us together, like one-on-one, we would probably say the same thing in different spaces, to just say we want to start conversations early. Conversations early is a gift that will keep giving because of the opportunity to explore what you need. And I love something, Michael, that you say, and you say it, you know, you bring it up every time in this piece. I knew what I wanted, but I had to figure out too how to approach my mom. So you were actually flipping it a little bit and you were doing motivational interviewing on your mom, right? A little bit. So it's this skill set that we're learning together, which is key. And it's complicated. I'm going to hand it over to Morgan now.
It is complicated, Mary, but they're conversations worth having, and continuing to have. I think really acknowledging that people with disabilities and you shouldn't have to be suddenly put into this artificial vacuum where they have to make decisions in a vacuum. Um, I think that's a really big piece in trying to demystify some of how this works in practice. I wanted to talk a little bit about some stories of supported decision making in education, because I really do feel that within the educational context, like Mike shared, um, there's a real role for supported decision making. I think it can be, if it's done in the right way, an educational a way of learning how to practice supported decision making in a team-based approach, given the ways in which special education is set up. And it can really serve as an opportunity for youth and young adults to practice making decision making with the help of their IEP team if the IEP team process is done the way it's supposed to be done. If it's done in the way it's supposed to be done. Um, Supporters can really help students use supported decision making to make educational decisions by assisting them in preparing for IEP meetings in advance and attending those IEP meetings with them, in reviewing school records with them and giving advice and helping them understand the educational decisions to be made. Guardianship is not necessary to get confidential educational information about an adult student with a disability or to go to IEP team meetings. A student can sign with a full signature or stamp or by mark a FERPA release of information form that gives schools permission to share otherwise private educational information with parents, family members, or other adults that the person trusts. And a student can invite anyone they want to go to the meetings with them. And so these are important things to kind of keep in mind. Massachusetts also has some other options to consider in the context of education that I want to make sure people know about. And I mentioned shared decision making. Shared decision making is when the student turns 18, the student can also choose to share their educational decision making authority with a parent or another adult they trust. And this really means that the student and the trusted shared decision maker make choices together about the student's IEP, and their educational services. Um, it is required to go through a certain kind of process within the school district, and you can get the required form there. It's now been incorporated into the IEP form, the option of shared decision making. And a student can revoke or cancel that agreement at any time. And if there is a disagreement that arises between the student and the shared decision maker, it's the student's choice that rules here, because the student isn't giving away anything. They are retaining their right to make their own decisions. They're just choosing to share it with someone else. So it's a voluntary arrangement in that sense. There's also something called delegated educational decision making. So that means the adult student could choose to give the educational decision making authority to a parent or other adult to exercise. Um, and so this really means that it's the chosen adult that gets to make the choices about the student's IEP. But so too, the student can cancel or change that arrangement if they don't like the kinds of decisions that are being made. But it is another option. And both of these should be thought about, I think, really carefully when you're talking about educational decision making. I recall working with a young man who had just turned 18. He had a disability and he'd gone through a lot of health issues in his short life. And when I say that, I mean he had to face certain kinds of hard issues about his own health and his own mortality that no young man should have to go through, but he did go through. And he had a developmental disability, but he was, and also some behavioral support needs. But he had very strong opinions about what he wanted for his life and what he wanted his goals for his life to be, including his healthcare journey. He didn't always agree with his mom when it came to some of these hard healthcare decisions, and he'd given it clearly so much thought into what he wanted for his life. And we were looking at his whole journey. But when it came up, his whole kind of life and healthcare and education and finances, and we got to the education piece. And I thought to myself, this young man can use supported decision making. He can make decisions about his education. And he told me no. He wanted to delegate his educational decision making rights to his mom to exercise. And I asked him why. And he said to me he had never been included or invited to an IEP meeting until he turned 18. He turned 18. They held it on his birthday, the IEP team meeting. What a wonderful birthday gift to have to go to an IEP team meeting on your birthday. And he said he hated it. All these people around the table were talking badly about him. He felt as though they were always focusing on what he couldn't do. They weren't focusing on what he wanted to do. They said these things about him. that he really didn't like. He felt it wasn't respectful. And he said, let my mom just take care of that for me. I don't want to ever have to go to another IEP team meeting in my life. And he was going to be in there, he was going to be in special education for a couple more years. And I thought to myself, well, he certainly had the capacity to delegate his decision-making authority if he wanted to, but I thought to myself, how sad. How sad that he was not in a respectful environment where he could try to have his wishes and goals known by his team and have a supportive environment that really wanted him to be his decision maker in his own life. I helped him do what he wanted, which was delegate his decision making, but I thought to myself, what a missed opportunity for this young man. Um, given he'd clearly given so much thought about his life, and it could have been such a more welcoming environment for him. And so I challenge each and every one of us to try to make these environments more welcoming for decision making of youth and young people, so that you really do feel self-determination and practice. And I always think about his story, and I view it as a kind of cautionary tale for someone who could have used supported decision making, but had been so alienated by the very team that was supposed to support him.
One of the
Next.
things, Morgan, that comes up for that is you share that example is this is exactly why you elevate this message so much in almost honor of him too, right? Is that there's the lessons that were given. And very similar, I just wanted to add, when my son, who's now 30, similar, when he needed to go to group care, as a 18-year-old, he turned 18 years old. He was thrown into group care with people that were often in their 60s. And we did some legislative change in Massachusetts called Reframe the Age, where if you were getting support by the Department of Mental Health, both of my adult sons never were able to see this change, but it extended the transition years because we know that the brain doesn't develop until 25, and now we're saying 28. But at an 18th birthday, the different expectations that systems often put on people around the birthday can often be an anniversary that's not one of hope and connection. So we really have to stop and pause and think about that, right? Where it could be one side or the next. But I think that, again, the lesson and the gift that he was also able to talk with you is to educate all of us to say, get people to the table sooner, to be involved, even if it is in that one sentence. I would have my kids often draw a picture for an IEP. How do you think school's going? Maybe they couldn't be in the meeting the whole time, but they had a picture that said what works or doesn't work. So I just wanted to highlight that because I think that's an important lesson, Morgan, for us to kind of take in to figure out how to support all. Thank you.
I 100% agree. I've been seeing in the chat some mention of things like healthcare proxies and release of information forms. And I want to just talk a little bit about these tools because supported decision making can be easily paired with these other legal tools when we're talking about that support toolbox I mentioned. This slide lists some of those common ones. So, the person using supported decision making could decide to sign release of information forms that allow service providers like doctors' offices and schools to share otherwise private information with the person and the person's supporters. And this just helps the supporters get the information they need to be able to support the person with decision making. Now, I've seen, when I'm talking about release of information forms, I'm talking in the educational context about what are called FERPA forms. I'm talking in the healthcare context about what are called HIPAA forms, and I've seen HIPAA and FERPA used as a weapon against supported decision making. And I want to say we have to advocate for people to be able to authorize the sharing of information if they want to people that they trust to get the support they need, so that they don't have to make the decisions in a vacuum and they can have those people that they trust help advise them with decision making. The person using supported decision making could decide that they want to formalize that arrangement, like Kayla was saying, and use a supported decision making agreement form. We have amongst the resources that we're going to be reviewing in a second, CPR has developed a model supported decision making agreement form and instructions for Massachusetts residents that we've used successfully with people interested in documenting their supported decision making arrangement. And we have that particular form available in English, currently in English, Spanish, and Khmer. So I encourage people to take a look at that if they want to document it. You don't have to document supported decision making using that kind of agreement form, but some people want to because they want to be able to clearly set forth what they're authorizing their supporters to do and not do. And they want can make it easier to enforce with third parties like doctors' offices and schools. A person using supported decision making can also decide to sign a healthcare proxy. Now, a healthcare proxy is a legal document where the person is choosing someone else to make healthcare decisions for them if something happens and they can't make those healthcare decisions for themselves. So the person would make their own decision with support when they can, and then they have the safety net in place if they can't make a particular medical decision. And I know a lot of people with and without disabilities who use healthcare proxies. Everybody should have a healthcare proxy in my estimation, because you never know what's going to happen. And we should remember that they can also be an option for people with disabilities, including those with psychiatric and behavioral health and developmental disabilities. In Massachusetts, people can write into their healthcare proxy specific wishes and instructions for what they want to happen during a mental health crisis or mental health emergency. So they could put in writing within that document what the hospital they prefer to go to, who they want to have be contacted, what their preferred medications are or aren't, what works and what hasn't worked for them historically when it comes to a mental health support. And so they can use they can use a healthcare proxy form to plan for their mental health journey. There's also durable powers of attorney. A durable power of attorney is a legal document that lets a person pick someone else to act for them for financial, business, or other legal purposes under certain circumstances. And the kind of durable power of attorney I'm thinking of, one that can be used with supported decision making, is one that could authorize a trusted supporter to handle certain kinds of financial, business, or legal matters if the person can't handle it for themselves. So it's another kind of planning tool that can exist out there that can be used alongside supported decision making. So it's not an either or. I think these kinds of different legal documents really can support each other in planning for the future and encouraging people with disabilities to have that same kind of planning and advanced planning options that people without disabilities do. Next slide. So, Kayla, did you want to talk about some of the key takeaways from supported decision making?
Sure. So thank you. So I think that if we write, it's a lot of information, but it's really important information. And I think that the key takeaways that we should think on this is you have to recognize the individual as the primary decision making, right? As we say, we have to validate them. We have to really make them understand that we do care about them, and the best that what we're doing with them is to, make help them to be able to have the right to say and to be heard and to express needs and wants, right? And above every other thing. Um, Also the use of supporters, understand that option. It doesn't have to be what we want as parents. It has to come from the person, from our loved one, who they believe that can be their supporter, and what's the role of that supporter, how much of the support the person can actually say, well, my uncle is going to be the one who I go for advice for financials, and my mom will be the one for the healthcare. And I have my friend who will be the one who helps me, like maybe taking some consideration for college and things like that. So allow them to have to understand how the support those supporters work, and how it's going to work with them. It's very important to acknowledge, we have to acknowledge that support decision making promotes autonomy and dignity, and it's a person-centered care. So we have to work with that in mind with them. We have to explain, you know, when we help them to explain their diagnosis, the treatment, the risk in accessible ways, they have the possibility of better outcomes, right? And more motivated and understanding better so that they can advocate for themselves in the best way. And with the support, let's encourage collaboration between person, families, and provider. One thing that I want to mention when I was talking about the healthcare, my son, uh, fortunately, his providers are really good, the current ones. But I had a history, like I previously, right, years ago, where I had a provider that I was not even to say I'm here. It felt like my son has to do it on his own. And there was a moment where my son actually told him, if she cannot go in, then I'm not going in. And I felt really happy about it because he advocate, like it's not that I was going to make a decision for him in that room, but he needed my support there. Maybe there was a question or maybe something that he felt like can happen that he will need me. Or it's just even just to see me there. Because honestly, I got in and I was just sitting there. So it's important to um, talk about, how this collaboration works between the person, the families, and providers. And not only healthcare, but also DDS workers, the family support center workers, the Department of Mental Health work, and whoever is involved in their life, we have to make sure that we all are like in the loop of everything, right? How this is working, how are we supporting this person with support decision making, and how we're expecting, and this person specifically, our loved one is expecting to be treated, to be validated, and to be um, supported as well when it comes to make decisions in his life for the things that matter the most. And I think other thing is like when we support, when we're doing this support decision making, we are also supporting informed consent, and we're sharing responsibility. So we we are validating, but we are also holding accountable each part, right? And we want to make that possible in a more in the most best way for the person, for the loved one. So in my case, I try to always ask them, the three of them, even the two, the other ones who have guardianship, always ask them, what do you want? What do you need? If this is okay, if how is it that you want it? And it's giving them, it's giving them the power, not us, not staying with us. That's not our power to take. It's us for supporting them, and they are the ones who have the power to decide. So I think this is the best way of describing this aspect of the support decision making.
Thank you, Kayla. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the resources, and this will answer, I think, some of the questions that are here. The first, is, CPR has a supporteddecisions.org website that has, for example, a getting started with supported decision making guide. I think there are also some really great videos that mass advocates standing strong have done on supported decision making that are led by people with disabilities themselves and talking about how it can work. Conexiones Latinx Massachusetts has some resources on supported decision making as well, as does the Massachusetts Protection Advocacy Organization, the Disability Law Center. And so we've included those generalized websites here. Next slide, but I want to kind of focus, I think, more on some of these fact sheets that CPR has worked really closely, in some cases with PAL and some places with CLMA in developing. I put in the chat the PowerPoint presentation slide deck, which includes all these links that are in there. So I think someone said, "Oh, there's all this terminology. What are all these words that are going to, how am I going to know what all these words mean?" We have a keywords to know in Massachusetts slide, or a handout that basically says, what is a power of attorney? What is a durable power of attorney? What is a healthcare proxy? What is a release of information form? What is supported decision making? So it includes some of that legal jargon, hopefully translated in a little more understandable way, like we've really attempted to do today, in our keywords to know handout. We have a handout that's Learn About Guardianship. It talks about kind of trying to bust up some of the myths that are existing about guardianship and similarly about supported decision making. And both of those are available in both English and Spanish. We developed a Q&A about supported decision making for parents, family members, and supporters in Massachusetts that go through some of the common questions that we frequently get about supported decision making, and actually kind of got that idea from one of the Q&A sessions that we had here, where we were getting some of the same questions, and we wanted to think about creating a resource for people that could address some of those. Next slide. We have a Getting Started with Supported Decision Making handout that kind of talks about some of these tools and how they all fit together in supported decision making. I had some questions that were in where can we get access to healthcare proxy forms? We have resources and forms for Massachusetts residents, and there's some really easy to fill out healthcare proxy forms that are available in a lot of different languages. They were developed through Honoring Choices, which is really trying to promote access to healthcare proxies as an option for people with disabilities and older adults. It also includes links to release of information forms and links to supported decision-making agreement forms, which we also have included a link to here as well, just to kind of say these are some of the common forms that are out there that could be helpful in this journey in thinking about alternatives to guardianship. So those are some of those kinds of resources. I'm going to turn it back over to Mary, who has a couple more slides, and then we'll do a Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Morgan. So we are available to you. So just want to make sure, and you will get this PowerPoint. You've got the handouts. We put it in the chat, but you will get an email after this that you attended. And I encourage you to just take the time to be able to go through some of this, because sometimes you get excited and you want to read the multi-chapter books, and then other times you're like, I'm overwhelmed. Where do I start? Kayla is available and is phenomenal in the community. We partner with her all the time. So again, her contact information, Morgan as well, CPR, and then we are with PAL, so we have the information directly with PAL, and then Michael also, if you're interested in that peer-to-peer piece, and I will just do a shout out for some of the connections that he's done with an amazing organization in our community called More Than Words, and they have been phenomenal in just young people. So Michael does a great job as like a person that works directly there with young people, so also continues to elevate his voice. So we are available to have conversations, to be able to kind of elevate this with all of you in that next piece. So this is really, I think, an important piece I wanted to just share is that I'm doing this again. I have a 6-year-old grandson. This is actually him. The picture to the right was how I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning one day when he had a clown hat on and the binoculars and woke me up. And then recently, this is another one of what he's done with magnet tiles. It really is in your perspective of the opportunity you want to give. So he had a situation where he needed to go to the hospital. At 5 years old, he walked in and he looked at me and said, Mama, I've got questions first for the doctor. And I said, okay, all right, right? 5 years old. His body, his community, he wanted to ask specific questions. He had just started taking a medication. He had to miss out on swimming. And he missed out on a friend's birthday party. And he wasn't too happy how the meds tasted, right? But he had a list, because advocacy is a family business, right? Our loved ones never give up. And as individuals, we want to be able to do this. So it's never too late. I want to go back to Morgan's story too. It's never too late to bring somebody to the table. But if you have the ability to start planning early, plan early, right? We all want to do it differently. So in honor of him, just want to actually, again, elevate. It's in the perspective of opportunity, and supported decision making can happen across abilities. People may not know what it means. That doesn't mean that you can't elevate it and bring that up. So the last quote, and then we're going to just kind of close out the session, is thank you for showing up. We've been well over 70 through most of this today of people that have been attending. We continue to do better by the questions. So we're going to have time for an active question and answer, which I'll help moderate. But really want to say thank you for showing up. Thank you for the individuals, your loved ones, Michael for his lived experience story, Kayla and Joanna, and also Morgan as the ally that continues to always say yes when I've got some wild idea that I think we can do together. So we're in this to make it better. So believe in the power of independence and the freedom to choose. When we explore opportunities like supported decision making as a pathway to true inclusion, alongside supportive team members, families, friends, we demand better. We create a world where every child and adult can live with dignity, inclusion, and a genuine quality of life. So with that, we will do that together to just elevate and allow people to have that quality of life that they deserve. So We appreciate you here. I am going to again thank everybody. We're going to stop the recording in a minute, but want to thank you for attending. This will be one of the many sessions that PAL does in collaboration, but we are here together with you to make these next steps. So thank you for attending.